And that's what we need to do, is support more of that successful entrepreneurship. Instead of going through and gentrifying neighborhoods, we need to support the people in the neighborhoods to own their own businesses and connect with each other more effectively and start and grow their own businesses.
Welcome to Talk to Your Government. I'm your host, Becky Yettaw, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Bill Carlson. He represents District 4, South Tampa on the Tampa City Council and has served as president of Tucker Hall, a top PR firm in Florida. With experience consulting for global corporations and background in marketing and public administration from Harvard, Bill brings valuable insights to our government. He's actively involved in community leadership roles, serving on the board of Florida Chamber Foundation, Florida Tax Watch, Florida Museum of History, Florida House DC, and the Pinellas Education Foundation, and more. We're honored to have Bill join us today. Welcome, Bill Carlson.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me here today.
Thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate you coming. We've been a big supporter of TVCN, and we're glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I wanted to start by asking you about arts and culture, because with what we're doing here, that is the most important thing to us, but I'm interested in how you're interested in it.
Well, we've seen over the years that arts and culture help define a community, help make communities unique, but they're also a magnet for economic development. I was involved in Singapore when I lived there for 5 years ago. Singapore was trying to grow from being a manufacturing base to being a creative and innovation base. And so they focused on what it meant to be Singaporean. At the time I was there, Singapore was 25 years old, and they were trying to define what does it mean to be Singaporean and to define the common experiences that people have. So I came back here in '94, and one of my first clients was the city of St. Pete, working on downtown redevelopment and marketing that. And we quickly saw that the arts were growing in a grassroots way. And we recommended to the city that they get behind that, support it in many ways. And now, not just because of us, but because of hundreds or thousands of people, the arts are part of the DNA of St. Petersburg. And the reason why St. Pete is one of the best economic development case studies in the world is because of its commitment to the arts.
So it's you, basically. You are the reason that St. Pete is
I'm not the reason. We had a small role to play in that we were representing the city of St. Pete and the Treasure of the Czars, which is the biggest, I think, arts event ever in Tampa Bay, and also the Dali Museum at the same time. And so we got worldwide publicity through my PR firm. We got worldwide publicity for the arts in St. Pete, including a full-page story in the New York Times that had young people rollerblading in front of the old pier, and it said, "No longer God's waiting room." And so it was part of changing the image of St. Pete, looking at St. Pete in a different way. But if you talk to any of the tech people in St. Pete, and there are hundreds of them that have moved there just in the last few years, they say that their best and brightest tech workers, like programmers, are also artists.
Yeah.
And they don't only want to go to see the symphony, which is important, but they want to be actively participating in the arts. So many people that in charge of software companies say their best and brightest programmers didn't study programming, they studied music. Because music helps teach you about the flow of things and harmonies, working with other musicians, but then you can translate that to working with other software developers.
Wow, I had no idea. That's amazing. How do you feel, what is iconic about Tampa? Like, I think that's been something we've really struggled with, is figuring out, like, what is the identity of Tampa?
We're continuing to evolve it. I think Tampa has suffered from what I call the edifice complex, where we measure success in terms of new buildings that go up. If you ask anybody, what's the big success of Tampa over the last 12 years? They'll most likely point to Water Street. And Water Street's great, it's beautiful, and there are Michelin star restaurants there, which are fantastic, but it's just a building block. The difference in St. Pete is what we did years ago is we built what I call the software. When I say we, again, it's hundreds of grassroots groups working together to build the software of the connectivity of people. Where in Tampa, everything was designed around buildings. And so right now we're going through a transformation in Tampa where we're trying to design the community around people, and we're trying to connect the dots on the grassroots level. The arts in Tampa are very sophisticated, obviously. We've got great venues here like the Straz Center, which is one of the best performing arts centers in the world. We've got Tampa Museum of Art, we've got Tampa Theater, and many other venues that we can be proud of. We need to highlight those, but even more importantly, we've got lots and lots of thousands of grassroots artists. And the grassroots arts movement is really flourishing now. I was one of the co-founders of the Tampa Arts Alliance with Neil Gobioff and Michelle Smith a few years ago. And we've connected the grassroots arts movement, and now we're trying to build enthusiasm about it, build awareness, and working with the Visit Tampa Bay, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and we're trying to explain to people the greatness of what's happening here and the creativity of what's in Tampa.
What do you think is the greatness that's happening here?
It's not, just like in St. Pete or anywhere else, you don't point to like a specific artist, although there are many well-known artists here. An example, I was in St. Augustine a few years ago at a gallery, and I saw these paintings, and I said, wow, these paintings are fantastic. And the gallery owner said, yes. And I said, they should be in museums somewhere. And the lady said, this artist is in 23 museums around the world. And I said, well, who is this? And she said, well, he's one of the top black artists in the country. He was a runner-up for the Barack Obama portrait. I said, well, where does he live? And she said, Tampa. And so I started asking people around Tampa, and nobody knew that he was here. And so I cold called him one day. His name is Dean Mitchell. You can Google him. And he's one of the most famous artists in the entire country. His art sells for a premium. But people didn't know he was here, and so suddenly I became personal friends with him. We started inviting him around to mentor kids, to speak at different events, and I mean, he's one example. Yala Ford is traveling all over the world selling her art, and there are many, many others who are world-class artists that just happen to be here because they love our community. Oh, that's awesome. The biggest thing happening in the arts right now, I think, is Ybor City, and that's where Gerald Shaw and his partners have made investments. Like in St. Pete, a few of us took him to St. Pete, gave him a tour 3 years ago to look at how art is the catalyst for change. Why is it that in communities, arts usually comes first and then redevelopment happens? It's not because art is the first stage of redevelopment. It's because people want to live and work near arts. Yeah. And if you look at places like Dumbo in New York, we know that hundreds of millions of dollars can be made by investing in and around the arts. And so Daryl and his partners have made a big investment in the arts. There's now about 50 artists in the Crest building, and he's making other big investments. Soon we'll be having our next art walk in Ybor, which is stopping at like 30 different places there. Ybor has, I think, 1,000 IT people with Ashley Furniture. Their worldwide IT headquarters is there. There are defense contractors, other creative businesses, and now the arts. We're bringing the arts back. Many of the artists never left, but some new ones are coming in. And I think Ybor in 10 years will be the next great case study for economic development in the entire world because of the connectivity of the people in the arts and creativity.
That's amazing. That was so many good things. So I just wanted to mention that you put together with another person, you put together this Ybor City Arts Council, and also the Cafe Con Tampa group that you run. So those are groups that are not involved in the many boards that you're on, but these are grassroots groups that you are growing.
So with Amanda Post from HCC and Tracy Medulla from Tempest, we started meeting a year and a half ago to talk about the arts, and we said, why don't we do this once a month and see if anybody else is interested? And so as not to step on anybody's toes, we called it the Ybor City Ad Hoc Arts Group, and anybody interested can go to Facebook and sign up for our emails. Now we get 50 to 70 people once a month that come talk about the arts in Ybor, and it's really uplifting. If you're just interested in the arts, if you're not an artist and you want to come, it's one of the most inspiring meetings you'll go to in the whole month.
Yeah, it really is. And I tell everyone about Cafe Con Tampa because it's absolutely amazing venue. It's an amazing meetings. The topics that you talk about are vital to our community, and it's a great way to connect with people that are doing stuff here. So you want to talk about Cafe Con Tampa?
Sure. Cafe Con Tampa started as just a neighborhood group in historic Hyde Park, and we noticed that when we had great speakers, lots of people would come. Sometimes we'd have 80 people in a little Spanish restaurant, Hugo's. When Hugo's shut down, we moved a couple times. Now we meet at the Portico every Friday, 8 to 9. You can go to cafecontampa.com and sign up for our emails or go to our Facebook page. But the idea is open source civic association. So there's no membership, there's no application, there's no application fee. You just show up. It's $12 for a buffet, And for anybody who can't afford it, you just send an email and say scholarship and no questions asked, we let you in free. And the idea is that we know in looking at other cities that we cannot grow as a city unless we break down all the barriers. If we have silos where different kinds of people can't get together, we're never going to grow as a city. And if you look, one of the things that did was created tampascorecard.com, which is a first ever economic scorecard of Tampa as a city, not as a region. And I worked with professors at USF and in Tallahassee and other places. And what it shows is that Tampa has a poverty problem. We focused on subsidizing buildings in the edifice complex for a long time, and now we need to focus on our neighborhoods and our people.
Yeah, well, tell me about this poverty problem.
An example, I may not remember the numbers exactly right, but in St. Petersburg, there's a disparity between men and women of like $3,000 a year, and in Tampa it's $9,000. In St. Pete, and I'm using St. Pete as an example because it's across the bay, in St. Pete there's a problem, disparity between blacks and whites of $15,000 a year, and Tampa it's 21. The state average of home ownership is 65%, St. Pete is 59%, Tampa's 49%, and African American home ownership is 39%. And if you ask Ernest Coney at the CDC, he'll tell you that right now there are 2,000 families in Tampa that have gone through the economic education and are prepared to buy homes, but we don't have the resources to help them buy them. And I think we're doing our community a disservice by not helping folks buy homes, because the way you build intergenerational wealth is by home ownership and owning your own business. And we need to support both of those.
How can we do that in our community?
Well, an example with groups like the CDC, Habitat, others, they can build homes for folks. It can be single family or townhomes or condos. And let's say that the building costs $280,000 to make up a number, and people at 80% of AMI, which is right at what's considered the poverty rate, people at that level can only afford $180,000. If we supplied $100,000 second mortgage, we could help buy down the price of the house so that they can purchase it. Then they build the equity, and the city or county or whatever would hold the second mortgage. We wouldn't charge them interest. And when they sold it, we would get the capital back, but they would get the appreciation on it. So if the whole house went from 280 up to 400 or something, they would still make the entire increase on the house, and all the city or county would get back is the 100,000, and then we could turn around and loan that to somebody else to help them buy a house.
Well, that sounds like a good idea, but is there any pushback happening from other people?
At the city, the pushback is the decision between helping people with rent subsidies versus buying their own homes. And my point is that if there are 2,000 families that right now have gone through the program, they're ready to buy, we should help them buy homes while they can.
Yeah.
Because inflation is going to only continue to go up. Rental assistance is going to get more and more expensive as we go forward. If we could help 2,000 people right now buy homes, imagine the change that we could implement. And if you multiply that out, that's $200 million. So the city couldn't do that by itself and couldn't do it in a single year, but we should start working toward that.
Yeah, and that would create less poverty in the future, right?
And all kinds of jobs. Think about a person buys a home. At some point, they could sell the home to their kids or their grandkids. Sometimes if a home is big enough, you can have several generations in a house. Right. It's transformational change of our community, but it's thinking ahead in a way that helps people feel invested in our community and so that they feel like they have equity in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. So if Tampa is suffering from a poverty problem, which I'm so glad that you laid it out that way, because I didn't realize it was so different from our side of the bay to the other side of the bay. I always thought that Pinellas County was sort of suffering more than we were, and we were the rich people. But that's interesting that you say that. What do you think some strategies to support small businesses and entrepreneurs are?
One of the things we're working on is the city is and Planning Commission are going through looking at the comprehensive plan again and updating it. And in that discussion, I'm proposing, with support and ideas from planners, a concept called neighborhood commercial districts. So let's say you're driving down Florida Avenue. You can just like Dale Mabry, you can be dropped off anywhere, but imagine you're dropped off instead at a place that looks like Hyde Park Village or the corner of Bay to Bay and McDill. The idea is to bring services into a neighborhood. So you take like 4 square blocks or 8 square blocks and you rezone it and say, in this area, we're gonna allow more density. So let's say a 4-story building. And ideally on the ground floor, on one corner, you'd have a small grocery store. On another corner, you'd have a coffee shop with a co-work space. And then on the other corners, other services. And then upstairs, you would either have affordable housing or workforce housing or some kind of subsidized office space. But right now, for example, in East Tampa, you talk to any of the business people and say, where do you want to meet for coffee? There's a couple of places, but there's no place like an Oxford Exchange or a Buddy Brew or a Blind Tiger. And if we went into 6 or 8 places in East Tampa, for example, we can do it West Tampa, North Tampa, parts of South Tampa, and we provided this infrastructure, and part of it is just rezoning.
Yeah.
Imagine that instead of driving across town to go to a grocery store, you could just walk and buy eggs, or you could walk to a dry cleaner, or you could walk to a coffee shop. And what it will enable us to do is bring in successful entrepreneurs to meet other entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And one of the great things that's happening in East Tampa, for example, as well as the rest of the city, but especially in East Tampa, is there are fantastic entrepreneurship programs. I went to Tampa Bay Tech recently. They have an architecture program, they have a graphic design program, and they have a general entrepreneurship program. They're pumping out people who are starting their own businesses. They're taking many people who are on free and reduced lunch, that their families are growing up below the poverty line, and they're starting their own businesses, and they're successful in their businesses, and now many of them are turning around helping other entrepreneurs, helping to lift them up as well. And that's what we need to do, is support more of that successful entrepreneurship. Instead of going through and gentrifying neighborhoods, we need to support the people in the neighborhoods to own their own businesses and connect with each other more effectively and start and grow their own business.
Do you think zoning, like you were saying, zoning has something to do with it, which is interesting to me? Like, I would think that people would want to start businesses in their homes if they could. Is that a problem? Is that something that doesn't happen in our country?
I haven't run into that as a problem, but what really creates community is interactivity among people. Even during COVID, we switched online and we thought that could replace everything, but what people missed was the human interaction. Yeah. And we need more spaces where people can get together and talk to each other, and especially with different kinds of themes. So, there are successful bankers that want to meet entrepreneurs who are growing their businesses. But right now, if they want to meet, for example, if they're from East Tampa or West Tampa, they need to go someplace like Oxford.
Oh.
Instead, we can create that in East Tampa, West Tampa.
I don't see anything wrong with that. No.
Another thing from a planning point of view is that in selling transportation solutions, folks talk about TOD, transit-oriented development. Mm-hmm. But what you see other successful cities like Singapore do is you build the development that's transit ready. And so I'm trying to get the Planning Commission and the city to change the language. Instead of TOD, the reason why they sell that is they say, well, if you invest in transit, then you'll get all this redevelopment, which will create tax revenues.
Right.
Instead, because the last 2 campaigns were screwed up, what we can do instead is build the development, and if we have what transportation planners call nodes, or I call neighborhood commercial districts, if we have several of these, then the buses will know where to stop eventually, or the train will know where to stop, or the trolley.
Yeah.
Right now, if you go down Florida Avenue, where are the natural places to stop? If you go down Dale Mabry, what are the natural places to stop?
It's always like where the shops sort of collect. That's
so
where
if we work on zoning and help people build density, like around Midtown on Dale Mabry, if we build density around those areas, then there are natural places to stop. And so if we have transit-ready development, that means we leave a place for the bus stop or leave a place for the trolley stop. Then we know that transit can come there, but we create natural stops so that people will want to go there. And then when we finally have the money for transit, it'll be successful because we already have the people infrastructure in place.
Well, I'm interested in District 4. I used to live in South Tampa. I lived there for like 20 years, and I loved it. But I found it very distressing. Like literally, I would get angry all of the time because I would see an adorable ranch house that someone had for 30 years and loved and gardened and made it beautiful, and then they would tear it down and put this McMansion up with unsymmetrical windows, which really bothers me. But and I just kept getting triggered, and finally I moved away from South Tampa, and I don't get triggered as much. But can you tell me what do you see as your role as the District 4 representative?
Well, I represent South Tampa, but we also vote on issues throughout the city. So the folks from East Tampa, West Tampa come to South Tampa. I try to go to their districts. In South Tampa, growth is a major issue. We see families being gentrified out, especially south of Gandy. People think that everyone in South Tampa is a multimillionaire, and it's not true. There are many working class people who live in South Tampa, especially south of Gandy, and they don't like feeling pressured to go. If you have, like you said, 2 huge mansions right next to you, and you have a house from the 50s, you may feel like you're pressured. But unfortunately, the state limits us on how we can regulate that. What we can regulate more is the massive multi-thousand units buildings, and the city has been trying to regulate that more in the last few years, south of Gandy in particular, but the whole South Tampa Peninsula is a coastal high hazard area.
Yeah, that's what I was
And
thinking.
when people are trying to leave from hurricanes, they have a problem because there are only so many ways out, and if you're down by McDill, you in particular have a hard time getting out. And so we've got to figure out how to plan that better, and this city council has been working hard to make that happen.
Yeah, the south of Gandy, Picnic Island area it's amazing what they're doing down there. I remember that along West Shore, there were just warehouses and like industrial buildings, and now there's these big condos that are taking advantage of the waterfront, which has always surprised me. We have such beautiful waterfront here, and we often are not taking advantage of it. So I'm glad to hear that. How are you addressing diverse communities in Tampa?
Tampa's success was that it was diverse. It was always diverse. The Cuban sandwich is a great example of Tampa being diverse. I think the connectivity of the people is important because every neighborhood has diversity of all kinds. There are pockets where there's more intense concentrations of certain race and ethnic backgrounds, but more and more there's a mixture of everyone. And what we need to do is make sure there's a dialogue, that neighbors talk to each other, that businesses talk to each other, and that people feel like they're part of a community. I went through Leadership Florida, and years ago a professor at FSU did a study to ask people, do you consider yourself to be a Floridian? And they did the crosstabs on how long people lived in Florida, how old they were, where they came from, et cetera, et cetera. And the number one determinant of whether people felt like they were a Floridian was if they knew their neighbors.
Oh.
And in today's world, we're all moving really fast. My kids play with their school friends online instead of running down the street. And so we don't always talk to our neighbors. And knowing your neighbors is still the most important way you feel connected to a community. So, I've been very supportive of helping to grow the neighborhood associations, giving them the tools they need to grow. And the more they have socials and ways for people to interact, the better we'll all get along with each other.
That's wonderful. So those are civic organizations that are just volunteer run, aren't they?
Yep.
So that sounds like a lot of grassroots effort is being done to make Tampa a better place.
And if you want to make Tampa a better place, go meet your neighbors.
Go meet your neighbors. Awesome.
Yeah.
I want to ask you this question. I'm very interested. You're my favorite, so you'll have to forgive me for asking you this personal question. But can you tell me a little bit about your mentors and the people that influenced you to become the person that you are?
Like everybody else, I had a lot of mentors, and no matter what socioeconomic background you come from, all of us need somebody that helps them along the way. The first one that helped me was a teacher in high school who was teaching at-risk kids, and I was student body president and a great student, and so he grabbed me and said, I want you to help tutor kids. And tutoring kids who were in 11th grade and couldn't read was really life-changing for me, and I found myself to be an advocate of that, of helping make sure that kids had the right chance to learn. And then the other thing is he had a program that promoted diversity within the school, and so it brought together several different races within a committee to look at how the races could get along in school, and I was chair of that for a while. And this was an incredible, unfortunately he's passed away, but incredibly motivational teacher. When we would go outside of the school together, kids would run up to him and say, you know, you saved my life. I was going to go into crime or whatever, and I had given up, and you inspired me to be successful. And I think every school needs one or more people like that, because that's how we change the future of our community.
And then you had another mentor that helped you later in life with your arts and your government work. Is that right?
When I lived in Singapore, there was an American guy who had a company that was a consulting firm, and he hired me, and he showed me how to dress and do business across 15 countries, and taught me at a young age to learn how to be a consultant. I was 23, advising people who were twice my age in 15 different countries. So it was a real learning curve, and I learned a lot from him. And then in Tampa, I've had a number of mentors. One of them is Tom Hall, who is one of the founders of my firm. But I remember sitting with him in 1988 when I was an intern for his seminar company, and he took me to the University Club, and he was explaining how he had bought his advertising agency from the guy who founded it. And I was thinking that I would like to do that one day. And then he sold the advertising agency, but he started another company, Tucker Hall, and he ended up selling that to me a few years later. So it's incredible how people can inspire you to be better than you thought you could be, and how they can be supportive of what you're doing in the community. Tom has always been, and Jeff Tucker, the two founders of our firm, have always been supportive of my efforts in the community.
You have a background in international government. Can you tell us what international partnerships you might be using in Tampa?
Like I said, when I was in Singapore, I did business in 15 different countries throughout Asia. I was always on flying somewhere. Since I've been back in the U.S., I've done quite a bit in Latin America, South America, Central America, and not so much the last 5 years since I've been on council, but before that. And a few years ago, I was international president of the world's largest network of independent PR firms. And so through that, we brought together people from around the world to look at how to do business together and how to connect. And Tampa Bay does not really do a good job at promoting international business. We do a little bit, but we need to do more. And so that's an area that I want to help grow. And I think it starts with making the right connections at the right level in other countries.
In other countries. And what kind of business could we bring here, do you think?
Well, if you look at Miami or Panama or Dubai, they've copied the Singapore model or Singapore-Hong Kong model. And the model is that you create a safe haven where there's great infrastructure, where people who are in other countries feel safe to bring their families and set up businesses.
Okay.
And so company in Brazil or Colombia, Argentina, wherever, as they're looking to set up a United States beachhead, ideally they would set it up in Tampa Bay. And we would have ties with those countries, but we also would have investment and jobs here. Ideally, we would be the U.S. headquarters for companies from the UK, from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia. And so those are things that we need to focus on more going forward.
Would they need land, to build? Do we have enough office space for them?
We have a shortage of office space everywhere in the region, and we're running out of land, believe it or not. As industrial land has switched to housing, we're losing industrial land rapidly. So it is something serious we need to look at. But it depends on the business that they have. Some of them might be just a headquarters and an office, and they might not move product. But another thing related to that is our port has been way behind other ports forever. Really? But with the management over the last few years, they've completely transformed our port. The way you measure port success is by containers or TEUs. And I forgot the new numbers, but let's say Singapore has 24 million, LA has 12 million, New York has 9. I think Savannah has like 6 million. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Jacksonville each have about 1 million. And for years, we've only had 40,000. Now we're up to about 300,000 because the current management is leading us to get more of the containers. And it's a long story as to why that is, but the biggest danger we have right now is encroachment on the port There are people who want to take the port land and convert it to condos.
I mean,
if
yeah.
we do that, we ruin our access to goods in the future.
Yeah.
100 years from now, people ask why we converted maritime land to condos, because we will need that extra land to bring goods in.
Yeah, I thought the port was a major economic driver of our city and has been forever.
It is, and we're out of land. If you listen to any presentations by the port, it used to be that we could say, okay, we're just going to move them further east. Where are they going to go?
No, they can't go anywhere.
Are we going to get rid of Apollo Beach and put port there? We can't. Everything is developed, and so we need to protect the land that we have.
Absolutely. Well, how can we get behind that? That sounds like a really great. I don't think the average person knows that.
The big battleground right now is the area where the cruise terminals are.
Okay.
There are people that want to convert that whole area to condos, and they're making arguments about why the cruise industry doesn't make sense. If we didn't have the cruise industry, we need to convert it to containers, because we only have 3 deep water ports within the port of Tampa. And if we get rid of that, if we lose it to condos, then we're in big trouble.
Yeah, we are.
And so we need to make sure we protect that. And the cruise industry also is important.
What about rezoning residents? Like, it used to be that you could, in South Tampa and in Seminole Heights and some of the more historic districts, that you would have a mother-in-law house in the back or a carriage house or something, and then you could rent that out. And there's a lot of places that have enormous lots that they could build a second house in the back or a little garage apartment or something, and it would solve our housing price. We're having a housing crisis. But I heard that was something that wasn't being...
It's being offered. They're called ADUs, and they're now we've made it legal in several parts of the city. South Tampa has some that are grandfathered in. I think they have more than any other area of town already, but it's probably not going to be an area where there's going to be uncontrolled use. The reason is that the state has preempted us on Airbnb laws, and although people don't object to a mother-in-law suite, they object to Airbnbs. And if you allow people to rent a unit behind you, then it's open to Airbnbs, and people don't want that in their neighborhoods. Nobody in the city wants that.
Why?
Because people have parties in there. You have, bachelor party, bachelorette party, whatever. We have complaints all over the city about that.
About noise?
But the other thing is, I'm a regionalist, so I'm involved in things in St. Pete, Clearwater, Sarasota, and last year I went to Austin with the St. Pete Chamber, and we asked Austin, when you allowed ADUs, how much of a difference did that make? And they said very little.
Very little?
Because, first of all, people have to have the money to build the ADU.
Right.
And they said not many people built them. And so what we need to do is build more density where people don't object to density.
Right.
And the problem is that all the developers want to build in South Tampa because that's where a lot of people want to live. In this area around USF, there's hardly been any development.
Yeah.
And so, and a big difference here is that we're on high ground here. And so when in most of South Tampa, most of the peninsula is in zoning district A, hurricane evacuation district A. And so as soon as we know a hurricane's coming, all of South Tampa has to evacuate. Guess what? There are affordable housing units in South Tampa, and several of them, the owners go in and turn off the power and the water. And the people that are staying there have no way to get out, and so they're stuck in units with no power and no water. And so it's reckless and irresponsible to build thousands of units of affordable housing in South Tampa when we can build them in other places,
Right.
because then they won't have to evacuate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think South Tampa needs to be denser, really. But there are other parts of the city that could stand more density.
In the last mayoral administration and the last council before I got on, the prior council and prior mayor approved something like 15 to 20,000 new units just south of Gandy, and those are still being built. But as they're being built, there's more and more congestion. And think about it, it's also a national security issue, because how are the people in McDill able to get in and out?
Del Mabry, that's the only way, right?
You have 3 ways out of there, and we need to make sure we protect McDill. McDill is an enormous economic engine and strategically important for us, so we need to make sure we hold on to it.
Not that I want to make more highways, but couldn't we make a raised highway over Del Mabry?
Go talk to the Expressway Authority or DOT.
I know, right? So I don't know if you guys know this, but you can email in your questions to talktoyourgovernment.org, and we have one from Jose. Jose asks, what initiatives is the City Council currently working on to address affordable housing issues in Tampa, and how can residents get involved to support these efforts? I guess that's kind of what we were just talking about.
Well, 4 years ago, the city of Tampa put zero in affordable housing. And then I made a motion to put 30% of the CRA money in affordable housing. CRA is community redevelopment areas, and there are 8 of them in the city. Another conversation. But the administration didn't do that right away. But that year, we were able to allocate $5 million for affordable housing. Last year, including federal grants, we allocated about $56 million. This year, it's going to be about $100 million. And so we're allocating more money than we ever have, but it also is an enormous amount of money, and the city cannot fund the issue. If the Housing Authority tells us there are 25,000 people that right now want to have registered and want to go into affordable housing, they say the unofficial number is about 50,000. If you multiply that out, depending on what number you use, it's about a $5 to $10 billion problem just for the people that want affordable housing, not workforce housing. The city budget, to put in context, is $2 billion a year. We're putting in more money than we've ever put into affordable housing, but we can only put a dent in the issue. So what we've got to do is figure out other ways to do it, and partnering with other agencies like the county, the state, the federal government.
What do you mean when you say affordable housing and workforce housing? I kind of thought they were the same thing. I mean, I just thought affordable housing was a place that you could afford.
Affordable housing is a federal term that is based on the average median income, and so there are specific numbers like 80% AMI is the one that people talk about, which is the affordable housing level. When people come into the city and talk about affordable housing, sometimes they're at 140% of AMI or 200%. That really is workforce housing. Those are folks that could afford to buy homes or rent homes, but ideally we would build more stock of housing so that they can move into them. One of the issues we have is if we leave it completely to the private sector wants to build expensive homes,
right.
And so we're missing the people below the average income because there's not enough stock being built. And so at the city, where we're looking at zoning, we're looking at other issues related to requirements around building. We're looking to financially incentivize developers to move in.
And how would you do that? Give them money?
Well,
you can't give them money because you're giving all the money up.
What I would rather do is a program like I mentioned a little while ago, where we'd work with somebody like CDC, and we'd provide $100,000.
A voucher?
Not a voucher, but a second mortgage. That way we get the equity back.
I see, yeah.
What we have been doing in the city is, especially with a big bump in inflation for the rental price, is we've been giving rental assistance. So we've just been writing checks. But that doesn't fix the problem long term, because the biggest underlying problem, one underlying problem is supply. Yes. The other bigger underlying problem is wages have not kept up with inflation. That's why we need to work on real economic development. Traditionally, economic development in Tampa has been about subsidizing companies from outside to come here, and there's not a very good track record on what those companies have done once they've come here. I passed an ordinance a few years ago to say that if the city provides a subsidy, we have to, whoever is receiving it has to sign a sworn affidavit every year for several years saying whether or not they hit the goal. Guess what? Since then, nobody's asked for a subsidy. So what I think we need to do is promote entrepreneurship. We need to promote the ideas that people are innovating here and help them develop them, and then help them learn how to sell them nationally and internationally. And that will build intergenerational wealth. With each of the big companies that have built up here and sold, every time a big business sells, like Sykes Enterprises sell, they all create lots of millionaires, because the people working within those companies get paid. And guess what? Then they turn around and invest in the next generation of companies. And the more we do that, the better our economy will be.
Absolutely. I think we have a lot to offer in the city of Tampa, and I'd love to see more people praise it for what it has. Like if you go to a public event, you just see everyone in the city of Tampa is there. Everybody. We're all there. We're all together. We're all having a great time. Everybody gets along. And that's a special thing. I don't know if it exists in other places, but it's different on the other side of the bay. And I think we have something really special.
Yeah, one of the great things about Tampa, I tell people, is we don't care about showing off. And so you can go to a mall or an outdoor place, and you'll see somebody like Chris Sullivan founder of Outback in khakis and a polo shirt, or you'll see Chuck Sykes from Sykes Enterprise in a khaki and a polo shirt. And these guys are worth hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars, and they're just regular people. Jeff Vinnick, same thing out in the community. And the more we're all connecting with people, the more we're hearing all the ideas, because a lot of the best ideas come from just the average person who comes up with an idea by looking at things differently.
That's wonderful. Well, you heard it here first. If you have a great idea, you should be talking to the City Council because they really want to hear it. Thank you, Bill Carlson, for a wonderful interview. I really appreciated all of the things that you had to say. And thank you guys for coming along to watch us at Talk to Your Government. And we'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Bill Carlson from Tampa City Council, and you're watching Tampa Bay Community Network.